pride so I don't do distractions. I'm coming back in.
Oh.
Back with this guy.
Back with this guy. Now, I mean, by the time this comes out, we already know that Kevin Durant is staying with Brooklyn. We know that, you know, all the trade requests, he took it back, all that, whatever. But we're going to go ahead, we're going to watch this video. It says nobody wants Kevin Durant. And I guess he's going to explain to us why nobody wants Kevin Durant. Now, this is the same guy that we reacted to a while back. He said Bradley Beal is the 32nd best player in the league. So I'm interested to seeing what he says. So without further ado, wait, I keep forgetting. Yo, what it do? It's your boys Juice and Lou. We back here with another banger for y'all. So without further ado, let's get into it.
When Kevin Durant requested a trade what feels like forever ago, I'm sure this is not exactly how he thought it was going to play out. I'm sure he thought, I'm Kevin Durant, I'm an MVP caliber player. He probably thinks he's the best player in the entire league, and there's going to be teams tripping over themselves to trade for him, and it would be a quick and easy exit from Brooklyn. Obviously, that has not happened. And now we're in a really interesting and a weird situation where there's a lot of rumors and reports coming out about the fact that maybe teams aren't nearly as excited to trade for Kevin Durant as we would have initially thought. And the team that I really want to start this conversation with is the Boston Celtics, because there's a ton of conflicting reports about whether they're the front runner for Kevin Durant, whether they're in on Kevin Durant at all. The rumors are all over the place. And the more I've thought about it, the more that I've realized that it's really unlikely that Kevin Durant is going to end up in Boston for a specific reason that I don't really feel like a lot of people are talking about. And the reason is Jaylen Brown. Now, Jaylen Brown has weirdly become like a centerpiece of this entire conversation with the rumor that they offered Jaylen Brown in exchange for Kevin Durant and whether that made him unhappy or not. And all of this leads to the fact that Jaylen Brown only has a few seasons left on his contract. And ordinarily, that wouldn't be a big deal in exchange for a star player. As long as you are either a restricted free agent, you have, a couple years left on your deal, you're fine. As long as you're not trading for an expiring unrestricted free agent, it wouldn't be a big deal for Brooklyn. And Jaylen Brown is certainly, in my opinion, good enough to be the centerpiece of a Kevin Durant trade. Here's the problem, though. There is zero scenario right now in which Jaylen Brown signs a new contract in advance of his free agency 2 seasons from now, because he did not sign a max initially, and if he re-signed right now and signed an extension, he would not be able to get as much money as he could get if he just waited the 2.
If you want to be on camera, you want to be behind the camera, you want to do radio, podcast, whatever it is, this
2 years. And that's important for a very obvious reason, because if you're the Nets and you want to trade Kevin Durant in exchange for Jaylen Brown and some stuff, Jaylen Brown is the guy that you need to keep on the roster. You can't lose the guy that you traded Kevin Durant for in unrestricted free agency in a couple of seasons. And if you're going to trade for Jaylen Brown, you would want him to sign a contract extension immediately upon arriving in Brooklyn. Think about when New Orleans traded Anthony Davis for, among other pieces, Brandon Ingram. He was a restricted free agent. They knew they were going to be able to retain him if they wanted to. That doesn't exist for Brooklyn, and they could very easily trade Kevin Durant for whatever the other pieces would be in the trade, Marcus Smart and some picks, if Jaylen Brown decided to leave. And given what we know about Jaylen Brown, I don't think it's a guarantee whatsoever that if he did end up in Brooklyn and they did offer him the max 2 years from now, that he would necessarily just go ahead and sign up to stay in Brooklyn. And to me, with that being the case, and again, there's no scenario in which it makes sense for Jaylen Brown to sign an extension right now, I actually don't know how Boston makes a deal in exchange for Durant, even if they are willing to trade Jaylen Brown, and theoretically, the Nets would want Jaylen Brown in exchange among other pieces. But the Celtics are far from the only team involved in this very ongoing conversation around Kevin Durant. We have teams like the Phoenix Suns that, for the most part, are out on Durant trades, in my opinion, until DeAndre Ayton becomes available for trade again, I believe, in January. Miami appears to have moved on. They've got some stuff to deal with on their own roster with an impending Tyler Hero extension and what that means for the rest of their group. And even a team like New Orleans that I think is a pretty perfect fit for Kevin Durant, they're not willing to trade Brandon Ingram either, and we've known for months that the Raptors are not going to trade Scottie Barnes in exchange for Kevin Durant. So now all of a sudden we're in a situation where it really feels like nobody wants to trade for this guy. Like, even given some of the issues that he has, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, you would still guess that when one of the best players in the league becomes available, a guy that is arguably one of, if not the best players ever available for a straight up trade, you'd think a lot of teams would be interested, but a lot of teams are taking their main assets off the table, which leads me to wonder where all of this is going to go. Which leads me to the big issue with all of this, and it's not a Kevin Durant specific thing. This is something that we have seen in the past with big time star trades that ultimately gets resolved but is more pronounced in this particular situation, and that is there's no perfect landing spot for Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant doesn't want to go play for New Orleans or Toronto or Memphis in an ideal scenario. That's not going to be his first choice. We knew what his first choice was. He wanted to go to Phoenix and he wanted to go to Miami, and neither of those teams are going to be able to make any kind of deal work for him. There's no other team out there that's willing to give up significant assets that also is going to get assurances from Kevin Durant and that he would also like to play there. And that's a huge issue because, as we talked about earlier, this guy does have some problems coming with him. He is an older player. He did have an Achilles tear a couple years ago. He did have an injury riddled last season, even though he was an MVP caliber player prior to the injury. And you don't know what his commitment level is going to be like to your team. We say this all the time in these kinds of videos because Kevin Durant can tell Toronto, New Orleans, Memphis, any team around the league right now, I'm committed. I'm locked in. I want to be a part of the future of this team. But he told the Nets the exact same thing like 13 months ago when he signed the 4-year extension that is now becoming very prohibitive to him being traded in the first place. You can't really trust a commitment from this guy, and that's not only hurting his chances of going elsewhere, but also it's hurting the Nets' ability to get top tier value in exchange for him. And so when I say nobody wants Kevin Durant, obviously if Toronto could trade, OG and Gary Trent for Kevin Durant, they would do.
It's time for the biggest sale of the year on the Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed. It's temperature balancing, so you both stay cool. Our smart sleep...
Do it. If New Orleans could trade a handful of young guys not named Zion or Brandon Ingram, they would do it. If they got assurances from Kevin Durant that he would be happy in each of those situations, they would do it. If Miami could trade Tyler Hero for Kevin Durant, if Phoenix could figure out a deal that involves Mikal Bridges and some stuff, they would absolutely do it. But in reality, nobody wants Kevin Durant at the asking price that Brooklyn wants in exchange for a guy that doesn't seem to be super committed to any one particular team for more than a couple of seasons and has the age and injury issues that he has. And as this saga has gone on, the one team that I felt like could potentially remedy all the issues that we talked about, where even if KD, does get hurt at some point, they can still be good. They have a championship window immediately. They have the asset to make it work. I thought that team was Boston, but given Jaylen Brown's contract situation, I would be incredibly surprised if Brooklyn went forward with trading for Jaylen Brown and putting him on a team with Ben Simmons and Kyrie or not Kyrie, whatever the case may be. I'd be really surprised if that happens. And there's not really a team for him right now. And so I seriously don't know what that means. I don't know if this is going to be something that's going to go into training camp. I don't know if Kevin Durant is just going to have to play, even though everybody knows that he's unhappy. And all of this is further complicated by the rumors that he supposedly is not going to play for the team as long as Steve Nash and Sean Marks are a part of the Nets organization. Now, to me, when that rumor came out, I immediately thought, okay, KD's done in Brooklyn, because you can't really, he didn't come out and say it, but it was leaked and it was reported widely by Shams. If you come out and say that, right, and it's true, let's just say that that's the case. Let's say that Kevin Durant went to the owner and said, I will come back if you pick me over these two guys. If Brooklyn suddenly fires those two guys to get Kevin Durant to come back, it's an awful look for them. It's something that they're never going to be able to come back from. No coach, no GM of real caliber is ever going to want to be employed by the Nets under this ownership. And then obviously, if you don't fire those guys, and it's actually what KD wants, then you don't have KD either. And to me, that was a leverage tactic. That was Kevin Durant and his camp coming out and saying, basically, we don't want to be here. This is how badly we don't want to be here. You either have to trade me or look really, really bad in order to keep me. And ultimately, that's why this situation is so screwed up. One of many reasons. So if I was the Nets, here's what I would do. I would slightly adjust my asking price around the league. Like, stop asking for Jason Tatum. Stop asking for like Zion and Brandon Ingram or whatever craziness they're asking these other teams from. Take your offers down just a notch and see what teams potentially bite. And if that doesn't happen, I would call Kevin Durant's bluff. I really, really would. I would tell him, say, okay, so you're not playing for us if we don't get rid of Sean Marks and Steve Nash. Okay, I guess you're just going to sit out. And I know that the Ben Simmons thing recently came out where he got some amount of his money back after sitting out of games in Philadelphia, but that's not really going to work for him because everybody knows that the reason why he isn't playing is because of a trade request. That situation was a little bit murkier in Ben Simmons' situation. That's why I think he got some of the money back. But I would call his bluff and be like, okay, so you're one of the 20 best players of all time. You're still one of the best players in the entire league. You're a guy that, in many people's eyes, has never won a championship in a real way. That's not my opinion. That's many people's opinion. And you're a guy that clearly cares about legacy and you care what other people think about him. If you want to take your age 34 season or whatever the case may be and sit out for half of it because you're pouting because you want to get traded, cool. Let's do that. Like, we already went the whole last year with with guys missing time and paying a ton of money to a team that ultimately wasn't very good and lost in the first round. We can do it again. That's totally fine if that's the choice that you want to make. And my guess is Kevin Durant doesn't want to do that. Everything we know about Kevin Durant says guy wants to play basketball. He cares about all this stuff. And I don't see him being someone that just wants to completely sit out. And so if you do that, if you're Brooklyn, either Kevin Durant comes back and plays, maybe you're successful this season and everything's fine, or he does sit out and you can trade him at any point. The market for Kevin Durant, I think, is still going to be whatever it is right now, even if he does sit out. And I really do think that that's kind of the situation we're going towards. Unless some team around the league drastically changes their offer or the Nets drastically change their asking price, I don't see a resolution to this other than the Nets calling KD's bluff. Add on to that the fact that he's already come out and said like he's not going to retire. Like that was a rumor earlier this week where it was like, oh, well, KD will just retire rather than play for the Nets ever again. He's basically come out and said that that isn't true. Again, the guy wants to play basketball. And from some of the reports we've gotten, I don't think that it's so irreparable that he would just never come back to the Nets again. Or honestly, I don't even really think that the Steve Nash Sean Marks thing is true. I think he could very easily just come out and say, I never said that. I was just unhappy. We figured it out, whatever. I think ultimately that's the resolution this is coming to. If Kevin Durant ends up on a different basketball team in September, I honestly would be pretty surprised at this point. And it's pretty incredible thinking about how much his value really has changed, because when he officially requested the trade, again, I assumed everybody was going to be tripping over themselves, offering all this different kind of stuff, but there's no top team here that everybody's bidding against. Like the Anthony Davis stuff, clearly the Lakers wanted him and they had stuff to trade. There's no ideal team here. There's no team that has assets and a situation that works for Kevin Durant except for Boston, which we've already crossed their name off. And I'm not even sure they'd be willing to do that in the first place either with what the Nets are asking for in exchange. So it's one of those things where we're going to look back on this 10 years from now, wonder how in the world this didn't get resolved quicker. But really it's because seriously, like nobody really wants Kevin Durant right now. Now, with that said, maybe you think differently. Let me know down in the comment section below what you think the eventual Kevin Durant trade is going to look like. Send me some ideas. We might have to do a whole nother trade machine on this guy with.
Well, now that we know Kevin Durant's not going anywhere. But I will say Jaylen Brown is out of there. I think Jaylen Brown is out of there when his contract is up and when he is able to hit free agency. And I just don't think he stays. Just because you saw his reaction to his name getting brought up in trade talks. And, he hit you with a nice little shake in my head. He hit him with a shake in my head. And it's just like, I think he said something about this before with Isaiah Thomas. When Isaiah Thomas got traded after all he did for them. Jaylen Brown was easily the best player in that finals. To me. I think he was the best player in the NBA finals. And then you're going to go ahead and trade him? Yeah, for Boston. And then you go ahead and trade him? That's pretty wild. That's pretty wild, man. I think either way that hurt. Boston hurt the relationship with Jaylen Brown. So I don't know how it's going to play out. But even if he plays these next couple years, I think he will not stay in Boston. I really don't think so.
I got a couple things. So let's start business. Let's start on the business side of basketball. KD signed for 4 years, obviously.
Right.
It's gonna be hard to move anybody under a 4-year, $40 million per year contract. It doesn't even just have to be KD.
Right.
It could be any superstar. Second off, no team in the NBA wants to gut their whole team for a superstar. We've seen it happen in the past with KG getting traded to Boston.
Yep.
It ultimately worked for Boston because they were able to also get Ray Allen to pair with him, Rondo, Pierce, and Ray.
Right.
That worked. That was like one of the only times it worked where 8 players could leave and get one superstar player back in Kevin Garnett and then be able to get Ray Allen as well. That's really like one of the only times that has happened, trading someone on a big contract. So it really will never happen. It wouldn't have happened for KD to get traded because, like I said, no team would gut 6 players and maybe 4 picks for KD.
Yep.
But I feel like if that's any NBA player at his age, 33, 34, there's probably maybe Braun, but But even then, Braun's not that incapable of like signing that long term because Braun only signs short term nowadays because he still wants to have an outlook on the future. KD really just signed to secure his money because he thought at least he would have Kyrie. Obviously, we don't know anymore with Kyrie's player option this upcoming season if he'll be a free agent after. Then you got the whole Ben Simmons situation. Ben says he's ready for the season now. He says he's going to be available this season to play. So that should be interesting. But, I mean, business, like I said, there's no team that would have done it, which he is right. So, even Boston, necessarily speaking, you talking about Jaylen Brown leaving. But where would Jaylen Brown go that's better than Boston?
That he can fit with, or that's just better than Boston?
Both.
Well, he's kind of like a Paul George.
Okay.
Jaylen Brown's kind of like a Paul George. So Jaylen Brown could go to a team where I believe he could be a number one. Because he's probably going to, I wouldn't be surprised if he wants number one or option one money. So.
But you're not winning a championship with him as a number one.
Yeah. Now, if he wants to win, he would go somewhere like, I think he stays in the East. Where we go? That's tough. That is tough.
There's only a couple teams I'll probably see him leaving in free agency to sign with. That would be better than Boston. At first I thought Toronto, but I don't know. Like I said, I still don't think Toronto with Jaylen Brown, Siakam, Barnes would still be better than Boston with Tatum, Marcus Smart. They just picked up Brogdon, Al Horford. Boston's a little deeper than Toronto right now, so I don't know if Jaylen Brown leaving Boston for them would be exponentially better. You got, obviously you could go to the Knicks, probably lure someone. Look, Donovan's actually
if they trade for Donovan,
but is Donovan and Jaylen Brown better than Tatum and Jaylen Brown? In my opinion, no. So, there's very few limited teams. Now, you're talking a sign and trade. If you want to do a sign and trade, there's one team I was thinking about sending them over to Denver. But you have to give up Michael Porter and Aaron Gordon in that trade. So it'd be Murray, Jaylen Brown, and Jokic. I think that would probably be better. But that's all depends on how good Michael Porter plays off injury. And I was thinking about this team, but probably not. So I don't know if their roster would be better than the Celtics, and that was the Mavericks. Him and Luka with Christian Wood. They obviously would need more depth in the future to be better than Boston. But I still, honestly, I think Jaylen Brown fits better with Tatum than Luka, because Luka definitely is more pass first than Tatum, even though Tatum's developing the pass first like he was during the playoffs. I still think Luka looks for his one-on-one play, his shot. Jaylen Brown kind of like the same thing. He's not really a passer either. He needs to work on his playmaking. But he just fits fine in Boston, in my opinion. And back to KD real quick, I think him, Ben, and Kyrie, I've already been on the record. I think if they're healthy and they actually play, they should be able to at least be top 3 in the East and go to the finals.
I don't know about top 3, maybe top 4 or top 5.
KD,
But KD, Ben Simmons, and Kyrie can definitely make some noise. But it's the same thing when it was KD, Kyrie, Harden.
Nah, this is better. More versatile defense.
Oh, well, I mean, I guess so. But, yeah, I think that's going to wrap up this video. What do you guys think down below? If Kevin Durant was to be traded, where would you want to see him go? If Jaylen Brown leaves, where do you want to see him go? Let us know what you guys think. But, hey, until next time, it's your boys, Juice and Lou, and we out of here. Peace.